In today's episode of Today in World War II, December 21st, the Japanese introduced an ancient yet novel way of bypassing British positions in Malaysia. The Romanians decide they don't want to be outdone by the SS in murdering Jews. The Germans surround Bastogne and take another key town in the area. And finally, an American pilot damages a brand new, sophisticated German bomber. Let's get to it. All right, on December 21st, 1941, the Japanese had already invaded Malaysia. This is part of their initial offensive after Pearl Harbor. After they attacked the Philippines, they were going after the natural resources in Southeast Asia. Their target was, of course, Indonesia, which was called the Dutch East Indies at that time, because that's where all the oil was. There was some in Malaysia as well, but their goal in this attack was to take Singapore. Singapore was the bastion of the British fleet, the main British colony in that area, and that was what they were tasked to do. Now the Brits, let's be full disclosure here, they were undermanned. Most of their army was in Europe and North Africa fighting the Germans. They had a lot of Commonwealth soldiers. They had Indian soldiers, some Australian soldiers. So they were undermanned, but they were at this time they were putting up some pretty decent resistance against the Japanese. So the Japanese decided, well, we're fighting in jungle here. It's hard to outflank the British and the Commonwealth troops that are entrenched on their defensive line. So they decided to go old school and they built a bunch of rafts. They put their equipment on there, their soldiers, and they floated by the British troops. Now, listen, they took a lot of heavy casualties, but as we'll see moving forward in this war, at least in the Pacific front, the Japanese did not care about casualties. They would have no problem sacrificing an entire regiment if that attack reached its objective. So if you were a Japanese soldier, you well, I mean, they all believed that they were going to go to Japanese heaven anyway. To die for the emperor was for the emperor was a glory thing, so they didn't really care. So anyway, they did float past. They took a lot of heavy casualties, but ultimately they were able to establish a bridgehead downstream when that left the Brits with the uncomfortable position of either detaching troops from the front line to go take care of that bridgehead or retreating past the bridgehead and set up a new defensive line. That's what they did. And so this was kind of a uh, precursor to actually how that campaign ended was the Japanese kept forced the Brits to retreat until they finally got to Singapore. They felt like Singapore, the British thought that Singapore was impregnable, and it would have been if it had gone from the sea, but the Japanese went over land, and a whole different story there. But we'll get to that later in this chronicle. What we won't get to later, we're going to deal with right now, is that I want you to subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell that signifies that you want notifications whenever I drop a new video, which, as you've seen already, I drop them every single day. So I appreciate your cooperation, your support of this channel. Thank you very much. On December 21st, 1941, the Romanians decide that the SS is doing too much of the heavy work, heavy lifting, massacring and murdering Jews. They decide they want to take care of business in their own country. So they ordered I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Isopescu, the Romanian governor of Golta Transnistria, Romania, ordered the the execution of all the Jews at the Bogdanovka concentration camp. There was about 4,000 Jews there. He did it in the most inhumane way possible. The Romanian troops herded them into cow sheds and then burned them alive. And then later, an unknown number of Jews were marched into a ravine, and the Romanian troops were on top of the ravine. The Jews were in the ravine, down the bottom, and they just shot them. And for this massacre took 4 days to finish. What can I say? When I always tell people after having spent most of my adult life over in Eastern Europe, visiting, dealing, talking with people in their own language, anti-Semitism runs deep over there. It still does in 2024. So don't be surprised that the Germans had a huge amount of very willing helpers when it came to massacring Jews. Uh, so I know it sounds bizarre to say this after that horrible story, but I would hope that you would take the time to like my video. It's very simple. You just go to where the thumbs up or thumbs down is below your screen, click on the thumbs up, and then please leave a comment because that helps the algorithm put my videos in more and more people's feeds, which hopefully will lead to growth of my channel, which is the ultimate goal here. And I appreciate your support. Thank you very much. On December 21st, 1944, the Battle of the Bulge continues. This is the initial push, the massive offensive that was started through the Ardennes Forest, which I have said in previous videos, was where they came out of nowhere and surprised the British and the French, and they ended up cutting off the British and forcing a major evacuation and winning the French campaign in 1940. Well, Hitler decided to try his luck again, and initially he had some great success, mostly because, our intelligence was faulty. They attacked, the German intelligence was better. They attacked the part of the line where we had a lot of inexperienced soldiers, a lot of soldiers that were pulled from other fronts to rest and recuperate, and they weren't ready. And the Germans came with a massive attack, and of course, huge amounts of prisoners were taken. In this case, the Germans were driving towards the Meuse River. That was their initial goal of this offensive. They wanted to make it to the Meuse River as soon as possible and capture Allied fuel dumps to give them the fuel to continue because they didn't have any more fuel. They were pretty much bone dry at this point. Now, I think it was yesterday, the previous day's video, I described that the Eisenhower had sent the 101st Airborne, and I think it was the 10th Armored Division to Bastogne to strengthen it because Bastogne was the key crossroads for the German offensive, and he wanted these were elite troops. These were not the ones I described earlier. So they knew how to fight and were ready to fight. The Germans attacked. They could not take Bastogne in a frontal assault, so they decided to surrender it. Excuse me, I'm sorry, surround it. And in the meantime, in another very key crossroads, a little bit north of Bastogne, called St. Vith, there was a lot of heavy fighting there. The 82nd Airborne had been thrown into that position. I mean, that position, but they were defeated, and the Germans captured St. Vith and continued on. So Bastogne, as a lot of you know, and it's got a lot of publicity, especially with Band of Brothers. They talked about that as a whole episode in the series about Bastogne, and of course, it was very courageous in what they did. It was a bone in the German side, a throat on this offensive, and they were never able to take it. Okay, and then finally, on December 21st, 1944. Uh, the United States Army Air Corps fighter, Donald Bryan, was able to damage one of the Luftwaffe's new jet bombers. It was called the AR-234. Now, damaging a fighter, an American fighter pilot damaging a uh, German plane is not really noteworthy in the grand scheme of things. So why am I bringing it up here? Just to give you the context of the AR-234. You had the Me-262, which was the twin engine jet engine fighter version. This was the bomber version. Now, I just want to talk again. I've spoken a lot in the last few videos about how terrible Hitler was in his decision making, and as a strategic leader, as a strategic military mind, his mind was full of sauerkraut because he made blunder after blunder after blunder, and this was another case of this. Do you know that they could have had these jet planes operational way back in 43, the first part of 43? They made their first test flights in 42. Hitler did not authorize them to go full bore on this. And when they did, he decided that they were more valuable as revenge bombers to attack England or attack, the rear lines of the Allies. And that was insane when you consider the fact that the air war was destroying his air force and bombing his cities and all, their resources, their factories, and so on and so forth. The priority should have been to get as many of those fighters out there to reestablish air superiority over France, the Low Countries, and even Germany to stop that from happening. But again, he was driven by revenge, and he didn't think that, you know what, we need to stop the Allies in their tracks because they were overwhelming the Luftwaffe. So they kept sitting up, they kept building Me-109s, Focke-Wulf 190s, propeller-driven fighters, and they delayed and gave no priority until the very end of the war to these jet fighters. Even when they did, they gave them more of a bombing role, fighter bomber role, and just a very few of them were actually fighters. So once again, using this small example to highlight how stupid Hitler was. Well, you're not stupid for watching this video. I appreciate it, and I want to thank you for being a loyal subscriber to my channel. So I look forward to dropping another video for you tomorrow.